Welcome back to another episode of Music with Map. I'm Wes.
I'm John.
And we finished season 1.
Yeah, true. Yeah. And the year. Of 2022.
Good riddance.
Yeah. It wasn't that bad.
It wasn't. It had highs and lows.
Right. Yeah, just like anything, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think that
2023 is going to be good, though.
Yeah, I like that.
I feel like I say this every January, though. Like, this is the year.
Yeah,
this is the year.
I mean, naturally, that's what you'd hope for.
Yeah.
You're not going to be like, this year's going to suck. Well, I mean, it's possible that you would say that. I don't know. There's good reason for it, maybe. But I would say last year, it probably started off on not as good of a foot as the foot that it landed on at the end of the year, you know?
Potentially.
Okay.
I think, well, back to the point of this podcast episode, we did a show and it was a lot of fun and we had some great conversations.
Great guests. Yeah. Let's talk more about the personal stuff. Yeah. Let's see, map aside, let's talk all of the personal things that we went through. That's absolutely true. And I think that we had a cool mix of folks who had a very different perspectives, and always, it's so great whenever you start off a conversation with someone, you never know where it's going to go, and it always ends up being, I mean, it's funny, I feel like with everyone, we said to them like, oh, we'll just record a 20-minute episode or something, and each episode was basically an hour long, so we split it in half, which was cool. But really cool experiences. So let's do a recap. So I mean, you and I always do our own episodes because, really it's an extension of our own vanity. Just kidding. No, it's we like to have our own episodes because we just naturally talk a lot about music in what we do. And the theme of the podcast is music as it intersects with whatever you do in your life. Obviously, a big part of it for us. But so we had a couple episodes of us. Then we had Gavin.
Yeah.
And Gavin is audio engineer,
which
musician,
provided some fantastic insight to one thing I really appreciated about Gavin, and what I appreciated about all of these stories in particular, but Gavin really exemplified it in a great way, was just his journey into music. You know, just how he talked about when he was a kid and just kind of playing with these different tools, and they were analog, and just oh, I like this, right? And then how that just kind of naturally led him into that space, and now he gets to be more creative, and as technology advances and accessibility increases for this space and this line of work, he's able to use it in different creative ways with the knowledge, you know, but ultimately the passion and the interest in that process hasn't changed.
Yeah, for sure. No, the technology was definitely part of it, which is cool. Having, and something I can relate to too, is just you can remember the life sort of pre-internet, and then, obviously where we are now. And I remember Gavin talking a lot about that this sort of steps and hoops that he had to go through in order to be able to use technology and stuff like that to create music. But yeah, also him feeling inclined to play the trumpet and stuff like that. And then also, I love his thing too, where he's what's so annoying and frustrating, but also very much a badge of honor, is when no one really notices what you do.
Yeah.
you know, in terms of the audio engineering side of it. And he's just yeah, cool. All right. Yeah. Awesome. So that was cool. And then after that, I think we had the Instrumentors.
Yeah. Good, friends of ours who started this awesome thing that's really kind of taken off in a lot of ways, the Instrumentors, where they provide guitars to a lot of folks that don't have the access to purchase or own musical equipment
guitar
that.
And the instruction as well.
And the instruction, which was a huge part of that thing. You know, you can give somebody a guitar, but without that support and time and energy that goes along with actually getting past the most frustrating part of music, which is actually starting to when you can play a chord or when you can play a bit of a song, and it's just that gratification then comes back. But until that instruction or that period is there, it's so easy to pick it up and be I hate this. I'm never doing it again.
Yeah, big time. And a cool thing with what they do too is how they have almost like the mentor part of it is well, not almost, literally the mentor part of it is that the folks that instruct the whoever signs up, that they stay on as a mentor with like whoever signed up and continue to guide them through their musical journey and like learning the instrument and stuff like that.
And just the overall aspect of community building that they engage in, they connect people all over the GTA, all over the city of Toronto, and do some really, really cool things, provide an awesome outlet for folks. And they're both great musicians in their own right. Yeah. And they're both CYWs, which is kind of our background as well, which is cool because
super cool.
Anytime we interact with folks in that space who are musically inclined, it's always a bonus. So
and those two guys, Judah and Chris, they both listen to a wide variety of music.
They're
music
lovers.
Which is a
lovers.
cool thing. Like, and I think you'd have to kind of you have to be like that, whether you do it in terms of like as a line of work or like as a community based sort of endeavor. But also, I think just as a music lover, it's always good to just be like open to a bunch of different music. So it's cool that they have that aspect as well,
Yeah, absolutely. And both really, really great guys. And that was a lot of fun, recording that one.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that.
And then let's see, after that, was it Rodrigo?
No, Lance.
Lance Stewart. Yeah, of course.
Perhaps like the coolest conversation that we've had yet.
I think, and it was like, all of the conversations were cool, but that was someone who, the conversation about vinyl, why people love vinyl, what it is about the medium that people are so gravitated to, like, that wasn't on our radar when we were thinking about the podcast and trying to find guests and stuff like that. Like, we weren't thinking, oh, let's talk about vinyl.
Mm-hmm.
But someone that we know mentioned Lance and what Lance is doing and for his PhD and stuff like that, and then we were like, oh, that actually sounds pretty cool. And then the conversation that we had ended up being so cool because just like with Gavin too, and it's such a common theme really in any of the spaces that we work with too, is this notion of technology, right? And just but
how it's not always like, I love that Lance really highlighted the fact that like we often innately view technology as this negative thing that's like encroaching in and taking over our lives and really taking autonomy away from us as creative people or us as people in general. But he kind of pushed back on that notion a bit, and that was I thought that was really, really, really interesting. Like this sociological kind of perspective of how that convenience has allowed us to do all these really cool things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and it's like, it's almost, you're absolutely right. So it's like people tend to just focus on the negative, but they don't really make a point or give much effort to recognizing the positives. And it's funny because it almost makes me think of Gavin and him saying the badge of honor is when I'm not really noticed. Yeah. It's like technology too, right? Like, someone might speak negatively of technology, but at the same time, they're probably walking down the street listening to music on a streaming service on their mobile phone, on their smartphone, using Wi-Fi, whatever, like all of these cool like technological advances that are just so beneficial to the day-to-day experience.
And I think what was awesome was that the root of that conversation was grounded in the fact that people crave the experiential element of consuming art and music and all these things, and that comes with like community, that comes with doing it with other people, that comes with a shared like experience piece, as opposed to just throwing earbuds in and putting on a Spotify playlist. So while technology was cool and important and like had all of these fun ways of interacting and accessibility and all these things that we talked with actually everybody with, like technology was kind of a piece in all of it, even with Instrumentors, right? Like the way they're able to video conference and connect people like during COVID and all of these things. So I really enjoyed that conversation. And Lance was a really, really cool guy. It was nice.
And a metalhead, which was a pleasant surprise for me. It's so funny how I feel like if you listen back to that, if I'm like, what music do you like? He's like, oh, I'm a big metalhead. I feel like I was like, no way.
Yeah.
No, it is very cool, and I think that also, just as a final point, kind of about the notion, the perception of technology, and how I feel like a lot of people, and again, in some of the groups that we work in, and when we're talking about music with people, a lot of people say, "Oh, nowadays everyone just does X, Y, Z," whereas in the past it was different, and I think that whether it's blatantly stated, explicitly stated, or implied, the idea is almost like with these more recent advancements, and it's quite a proliferation of advancements too. Like, if you think about the internet and then like all of these gadgets and things like that has happened, like there's been a lot that's happened in the past, like 20 years or something like that, right? Whereas the 20 years previously, maybe you wouldn't have seen quite as expansive, quite an expanse. But at the same time, I just feel like it's cool that you say that, and Lance sort of says as well. It's almost like this expansion of technology makes people appreciate more this more analog medium, or not more, this analog medium, and like the steps around the consumption of it and playing a record and listening to music that way. So I thought that it was super cool that someone who kind of speaks with people who really, really love vinyl, which represents this physical, tangible, analog medium, he's the one that says, no, we need to appreciate technology. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of cool that kind of came, that's what came from the conversation.
And look, as somebody who, and we did an episode about this, as somebody who signed up for a music streaming service for the first time in my life, and I've always obviously been into music.
Yeah.
And my, record and CD collection there's just no space for it in my apartment anymore.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the streaming service. It's cool. Like my ability to find new music, my ability to engage with new music.
Yes.
And yet that experience is still grounded in sharing it with others and talking about it with others and playing it with others, in all of these things. So a really cool conversation, and looking forward to kind of seeing where Lance goes on his academic and career journeys. And we'll definitely check in with him again.
Yes, which is also sort of a takeaway from this year with like a bunch of the guests that we had. After recording the episode, I know you and I felt, again, multiple times that it was like, it would be cool to check back with these people again a little later to kind of just see where we're at. Sorry, where they're at. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then next we had Rodrigo.
Then it was Rodrigo, who is like, a homie, but also someone who just has found really cool ways to incorporate music in what they do and kind of who they are as a person, know?
Well, it's interesting with Rodrigo because you're like old buddies with him, and I'm familiar with him on like the TV. Like I've seen him like be a guest star, not star, but like a guest actor in all kinds of different TV shows on like CBC in particular and other things. But it was really cool, again, learning his journey and just kind of hearing how. And I think we talked about this in the episode, but hearing how he goes through the creative process.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
And that's so different for everybody who works in that space.
Yeah.
But for somebody who's as successful as Rodrigo in, the arts and in acting and in comedy, how he utilizes music and how he just kind of navigates that creative process.
Yeah.
And creates like, art that he makes a living off of.
Exactly, yeah. Like how basically for him sort of finding out what it was that uniquely made him who he was. It was like the presence and the involvement of music, and how he was able to incorporate that and be like, I feel like he said something, oh, like I'm actually really good at this, and like I'm going to keep doing that. And it was funny. I remember because I've participated in some of the recordings for Rod's group, Fog and Lasers, and played in the live shows and stuff like that. And it was funny because before that podcast episode, I was thinking, how does Rod even write these songs? Like, I don't actually know. Like, I just kind of get him like after the fact, or maybe I'm part of the creative process. But in terms of the original idea, like where did that come from? I have no idea. So it's cool to hear him talk about that.
Yeah.
And
again, the community collaborative piece
say,
that like he incorporates to his creative process, and that's obviously a theme to all of these people that we talk to this whole show is that music isn't like this isolated thing where you just sit by yourself in a room and put it all together, and maybe that's part of the process, but that's not what the process.
It's not the end result.
Exactly, because there's so many people involved in creating and recording and producing and releasing and distributing and,
Yeah.
and then consuming music and art to a larger degree.
Yep.
But I just love that shared experience that Rod kind of really highlighted with his with his creative
and
process.
I think it's cool too, like any kind of creative endeavor, it really is so cool. And often I feel like the better outcome is when you sort of, it's not about me, only me.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like, sure, I have this idea, but who else can I use and how else can I incorporate ideas to sort of make this better and take it somewhere else, And like Rod does such a good job with that with the different people that he works with.
Like a great example of that is Bob Dylan, right? Who is somebody who just like, oh, I wrote these songs, I play guitar, but then like some of his best material and like the best live shows for sure was when he toured with the band.
Right.
And it was, again, this like collaborative experience where he works with other people and, obviously this is a subjective take on Bob Dylan, but like unequivocally, it's the best Bob Dylan stuff.
Oh, it was with the band.
With the band, yeah.
Right.
And they toured with him for years. And then the basement tape recordings are just so cool because they're just all having fun and riffing together. And it's, again, that sort of community experience. But who do we have after Rodrigo?
Then
Jay.
Yeah.
Jay is somebody we're definitely going to get back on because there
Jaeson
were so many things said there that we just like we wanted to touch on, but also it's just like, we only have a certain amount of time.
Case in point was I don't remember exactly who was involved, but he was just like, like, well, that was the time where Mason Puff Daddy and we were there and they like blew up a car in the desert or something
like a rocket
that.
launcher or something.
Yeah. And we're just like, somehow we grazed over that point.
Yeah.
And then after the fact, we're like, what?
Yeah, let's go back.
That's an episode in and of itself. So we'll definitely revisit that.
But extremely talented guy, and like just cool that more of that production, more of that back end side of things, like a little bit about the artist development piece, a little bit about the
like a lot of the business side of things as well. But I also like in terms of the notion of like the behind the scenes aspect was, as we learned through the process of like, Jay as an artist, and now and stuff like that, in terms of what he's been doing, but it's just like the writing was a big part of it, right? And the notion of how even right now he could act as, or he could be a ghostwriter for someone. And in the early days of him sort of starting off as an artist, a big part of it was just writing. Like he said, he's like, I'm going to write 1,000 songs before I even start telling people like I'm a song creator. I'm an artist, you know, which is just ridiculous. When you think about that, like 1,000 songs is just like a huge, it's not like, I'll fire a couple off and then maybe like,
1,000's a lot.
It's a lot. It's like, that's a lot of music.
Yeah, that's a lot.
But at the same time, it's like all part of that process. Everyone has their own process, and that's like that, just like part of the process for Jay. And it was cool to hear him talk about that, and again, like the different aspects of his involvement in the music industry.
And one thing I really, really appreciated about that is the aspect of practice. Right? This is something that you like. If you want to pursue music and you really like want to pursue it and make a living at it, it's practice, and it's putting in that time so that when you're in those situations, you're able to kind of like, reflex takes over and you're able to react and just do it.
Yeah. And I feel like his music really embodies that because he has a lot of like is excellent lyrical content, but I would say more so in terms of like the flow and cadence. He is able to do things sometimes in a really fast kind of cadence, and there's a lot of words that are coming through, and he does so successfully, and it's because he put in the time, in terms of writing and then also just performing. That's where you get that from. You can't. We've done this before with sometimes with people, maybe for the first time or whatever it is, they get behind the mic and they try to do something fast or really busy with a lot of words, and in the end, it's just a lot of slurred words are not enunciated, and it's cool that they have had that experience, but in terms of successfully being able to like pull it off, it takes time and it takes practice. It's almost like a guitar. Like you want to shred a solo on the guitar, maybe to a degree you can play a bunch of notes like pretty fast and it might sound okay, but someone who is able to do that really well, they're the ones that have been like spending time in like the shop playing to a metronome or whatever, just like at slow tempos, fast tempos, and then when it comes to actually being able to record that stuff, then they do it well. So anyway, that was a great great conversation to have with Jay.
And there will be more.
And there will be more. Yeah. It's so hilarious that we were just like, hold on a second. You blew up a car in the desert with like these huge people when you were, I think it was part of like the Cash Money Records thing that you had going on as well. Yeah. So it's just like so much to unpack there, but, and just the notion of him being the translator, which is I think what we called the episode, but, it was cool for him to have that perspective, that role.
And just ultimately like a really cool dude.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And then it was Daniela.
And then Daniela? Is that the last? Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I guess because we had a few of our own episodes. And again,
they were all two-parters.
Yeah, we all split them up because they ended up being a little bit longer than we expected, which was cool. But yeah, that was a really nice treat too because speaking of, practice and, focusing on technique and fundamentals, like being a music teacher.
Danielle's very talented,
and a very talented player too. Phenomenal.
But again, that comes with practice, right?
Yeah,
and just learning the language of music. Like, we often use that analogy when we talk to folks that we work with, and like, ooh, what sheet music? Okay, it's like its own language, its own written language, And once you learn it, you know it, and you can use it. And Daniela is just one of those people that has mastered that, right?
Yeah, for sure. But also what I appreciated too was I feel like in her approach as an instructor, as like a music teacher, she made a point, I feel like, of incorporating different aspects to teaching. Like I remember her talking about like in a class, instead of sort of like instructing to a larger class, she would break down people into individual groups and almost like let that individual group dynamic of those students, and some are stronger and some may not be as strong, but naturally they'll be able to work together and achieve this desired outcome. And it's not even as much about what she's doing. It's almost more like the absence of her presence in that process is actually what helps to have these students learn, and also just like the amazing outcomes of when people sort of go through the process of learning these things, but then it comes to fruition when they have these like live performances and how it causes them to makes them look back and reflect on the whole process and everything like that and how far they've come. And it's just like, I appreciated how for Daniela, and she has such a strong role in the learning and the outcomes of these kids that she teaches, but at the same time, the way that she spoke about it was very, very like modest, and she was quite humble in how she's sort of saying it's like not even really about me, it's more about like them and their process, and I'm just like along for the ride,
And again, another cool person to check in with, because now she's over in Europe doing her
in Scotland,
doing her masters,
and also using cool technology with playing the 5-string viola, but using a whole bunch of like guitar stompbox pedals and stuff like that in a live show, and how and even seeing Daniela perform live doing a solo show, technology was very much a part of what she was very much incorporated in the whole live show, having things like pre-recorded and playing through the PA, and then her playing live over top and things like that. So very much, again, a cool nod to inadvertently this theme of technology through the guests that we have had. But it's just cool, the different perspectives of people using music in their day-to-day lives in totally different ways. But
yeah, it was a lot of fun for us to do, a lot of fun for us to have these conversations, and we look forward to doing more. So hey, like, thanks everybody for checking it out and spending some time listening and sort of navigating all of this with us. And stay tuned for a lot more great stuff.
Absolutely. Hopefully 2022 was okay for you all in all. And here's to 2023. And thanks very much for listening, and stay tuned for more.